Daniel Brooks wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed the narrow staircase of his apartment building. It was another Tuesday morning, which meant it was time to help his neighbor. For the past 7 years, this had been his routine. 3 times every week without fail. The building was old, built sometime in the 1960s, and nobody had bothered to install an elevator. Most people didn't mind the stairs, but for 70-year-old Raymond Miller on the 4th floor, those stairs might as well have been Mount Everest. Raymond couldn't walk. He'd been in a wheelchair for as long as Daniel had known him. Daniel knocked on apartment 4B and waited. He could hear the TV playing inside, some morning news program talking about the weather. A moment later, the door opened and Raymond sat there in his wheelchair, already dressed and ready to go. "Morning, Daniel," Raymond said with a small smile. "You're right on time, as always." "Wouldn't want to keep you waiting," Daniel replied, stepping inside. "Doctor's appointment today, right?" Raymond nodded. "Just a regular checkup. Nothing serious. I really appreciate you doing this, you know. I don't know what I'd do without your help." Daniel had heard this same thank you 1,000 times, but he never got tired of it. He positioned himself behind the wheelchair, locked the brakes, and then carefully lifted Raymond onto his back. The older man weighed maybe 150 pounds, lighter than the concrete bags Daniel carried at his construction job. Still, 4 flights of stairs made anything feel heavy. Step by step, Daniel descended. He'd gotten good at this over the years. He knew which steps creaked, which railing was loose, where to pause and catch his breath. Raymond stayed quiet during the journey, his thin arms wrapped loosely around Daniel's shoulders. They'd done this so many times that they moved like one person. When they reached the ground floor, Daniel settled Raymond back into his wheelchair and pushed him outside to where Daniel's old pickup truck waited at the curb. Getting Raymond into the passenger seat was another careful process. Fold the wheelchair, store it in the truck bed, then help Raymond slide across into the seat. By the time they were both buckled in, Daniel's shirt was damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. The drive to the medical center took about 20 minutes. Raymond stared out the window, watching the city pass by. He didn't talk much, never had. In all these years, Daniel knew very little about the man's life. He knew Raymond had been in a terrible car accident 12 years ago. He knew Raymond had no family nearby, maybe no family at all. He knew the older man lived alone, survived on disability checks, and rarely left his apartment except for these medical trips and the occasional grocery run. "How are your girls doing?" Raymond asked, suddenly breaking the silence. Daniel smiled. "They're good. Melissa just made the honor roll again. Katie's still figuring out high school, but she's getting there." "You're doing a great job with them," Raymond said quietly. "Raising 2 teenagers alone, working those long hours. That's not easy." Daniel shrugged, though the compliment meant more than he'd admit. "You do what you have to do, right?" Their mother left when Katie was 6. Someone had to step up. What Daniel didn't mention was how hard things really were. The child support that never came. The debt from the divorce. The double shifts he worked just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Most months he was choosing between paying the full electric bill or putting enough gas in his truck. His boots had holes in them, but new ones would have to wait. Yet here he was, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, carrying his neighbor down 4 flights of stairs for free. People at work thought he was crazy. His buddy at the construction site, Mike, had asked him once why he bothered. "You've got your own problems, man. Let social services handle it." But Daniel couldn't do that. When he'd first moved into the building 7 years ago, he'd seen Raymond struggling near the stairs, trying to figure out how to get down for a doctor's appointment. The landlord had promised to help but never showed up. Daniel had offered to carry him that one time, just that once, and somehow it had become a regular thing. A commitment, a responsibility he'd taken on without really meaning to. They arrived at the medical center and Daniel went through the familiar routine. Wheelchair from the truck bed, Raymond into the chair, push through the automatic doors, check in at the front desk. The receptionist knew them by now, always smiled and said hello. "I'll wait here," Daniel said, settling into one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting room. He pulled out his phone and checked his messages. Melissa wanted money for a school trip. Katie needed new shoes. The landlord was reminding him that rent was due in 5 days. Daniel rubbed his eyes. He'd been awake since 5 in the morning, had already put in 4 hours at a job site before coming here. After dropping Raymond home, he'd head back to work until dark. Then there was dinner to make, homework to check, bills to juggle. The weight of it all pressed down on his shoulders like those concrete bags, never getting lighter, never giving him a break. An hour later, Raymond emerged from the doctor's office. Daniel stood up, his back cracking as he stretched. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just fine," Raymond said. "Same as always. Blood pressure's a bit high, but nothing serious." They drove back in comfortable silence. Daniel was thinking about what to make for dinner with the $20 in his wallet. Raymond was looking out the window again, his face unreadable. Back at the apartment building, they went through the process in reverse. Raymond into the wheelchair onto the elevator. Daniel's back, 4 flights up. By the time they reached Raymond's door, Daniel's legs were burning. "Thank you again," Raymond said, like he always did. "You're a good man, Daniel." Daniel waved it off. "No problem. See you Thursday. I'll be here." Daniel headed back down to his own apartment on the 2nd floor. He had 30 minutes before he needed to leave for his afternoon shift. Just enough time to make a sandwich and check on the bills piling up on his kitchen table. He never asked Raymond for money. The thought had crossed his mind a few times, especially during the really tough months. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Raymond was clearly struggling too, living in that tiny apartment, surviving on whatever small checks the government sent him. What kind of person would ask a disabled old man for money? So Daniel kept climbing those stairs, kept lifting that weight, kept showing up every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday like clockwork. It was just what neighbors did for each other, wasn't it? It was just being decent. He had no idea that everything he believed about Raymond Miller was about to fall apart. No idea that 7 years of kindness were built on a foundation of lies. And he definitely had no idea that one hot August afternoon just a few weeks from now would change absolutely everything. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in the middle of August. Daniel was at a construction site hammering down roofing tiles under a blazing sun when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost didn't answer it, figuring it was probably a telemarketer or another bill collector, but something made him pull off his work gloves and check the screen. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Daniel Brooks?" a woman's voice asked. "Yeah, that's me. This is Patricia from Valley Medical Center. I'm calling about Raymond Miller. You're listed as his emergency contact." Daniel's heart skipped. "Is he okay? What happened?" "Mr. Miller was brought in by ambulance about an hour ago. A neighbor found him collapsed in his apartment. He's stable now, but we'd like you to come down if you can." Daniel was already heading toward his truck, calling out to his supervisor that he had a family emergency. 20 minutes later, he was rushing through the hospital's automatic doors, still wearing his dusty work clothes and boots. They directed him to the 3rd floor. He found Raymond in a small room, looking pale and smaller than usual in the hospital bed. An IV dripped steadily into his arm and several machines beeped quietly around him. "Raymond," Daniel said softly, approaching the bed. The older man's eyes opened slowly. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for them to bother you at work. Don't worry about that. What happened?" Before Raymond could answer, a doctor walked in, a young woman with kind eyes and a tablet in her hands. "Mr. Brooks, I'm Dr. Chen. Can I speak with you outside for a moment?" Daniel felt a chill run through him. That's never a good sign when doctors want to talk privately. He followed her into the hallway, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. "Is he going to be okay?" Daniel asked immediately. "He had a minor stroke," Dr. Chen explained. "We caught it early and he's receiving treatment. With therapy and medication, he should recover most of his functions. But I need to ask you some questions about his medical history. I'll help however I can, but honestly, I don't know much. He's pretty private." Dr. Chen looked at her tablet, then back at Daniel with a puzzled expression. He told the EMTs that he's been paralyzed since a car accident 12 years ago. "Is that correct?" "Yeah, that's what he told me. He's been in a wheelchair the whole time I've known him. 7 years now." The doctor's frown deepened. "That's what's confusing us. We've run several tests, including MRIs and nerve conduction studies. There's no evidence of any spinal injury or nerve damage that would prevent him from walking." Daniel stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, his legs are completely functional. There's no medical reason for him to be in a wheelchair. No signs of old injuries. No muscle atrophy that would indicate long-term paralysis. His legs are actually in remarkably good shape for someone his age." The hallway seemed to tilt. Daniel leaned against the wall. "That's not possible. I've been carrying him up and down stairs for 7 years. He can't walk. I've seen him in that wheelchair every single time. I understand this is shocking, Dr. Chen said gently, but our tests are very clear. Whatever Mr. Miller told you about a car accident causing paralysis, it's not supported by any medical evidence. We're going to do more tests, but right now, it appears he's been physically capable of walking this entire time. Daniel couldn't speak. His mind was reeling, trying to process what he was hearing. 7 years, 3 times a week, hundreds of trips up and down those stairs, the aching back, the sore muscles, the time and effort he'd given freely, gladly even, because he thought he was helping someone who truly needed it. There must be some mistake, he finally managed. We're very thorough with our assessments, Dr. Chen said. I'm sorry to give you this news. I thought you should know before we discuss it with Mr. Miller. Daniel walked back into the room in a daze. Raymond was awake, watching him with those same quiet eyes. The doctor says you can walk, Daniel said, his voice flat. Raymond closed his eyes and didn't respond. Raymond, look at me. The old man opened his eyes, and for the first time Daniel saw something there he'd never seen before. Fear, shame, guilt. Is it true? Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer in his gut. A long silence stretched between them. The machines continued their steady beeping. Somewhere down the hall a nurse laughed at something. Finally Raymond spoke so quietly Daniel almost didn't hear him. Yes, that single word hit Daniel like a physical blow. He sank into the chair beside the bed, his legs suddenly weak. You can walk, he repeated, still not quite believing it. I can walk. The car accident? There was no accident. Not like I said. Daniel felt something hot and terrible rising in his chest. Anger, betrayal. 7 years of his life given freely to a lie. Why? The word came out harsh, demanding. Why would you do that? Why would you let me carry you all this time? Raymond turned his head away, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. I can't explain it right now, please. No. Daniel stood up, his hands shaking. You don't get to do that. You don't get to lie to me for 7 years and then refuse to explain. I have 2 kids. I work myself half to death just to keep us afloat. And every week, 3 times a week, I dropped everything to help you. Because I thought you needed me. Because I thought I was doing something good. You were, Raymond whispered. You are. You're a good man, Daniel. Don't. Daniel's voice cracked. Don't you dare tell me I'm a good man right now. You used me. You lied to me. For 7 years. Raymond was crying openly now, his thin shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You have every right to hate me, Daniel wanted to shout. He wanted to rage. He wanted to grab Raymond by the shoulders and shake him until he made sense. But looking at the old man crying in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines looking frail and broken, all Daniel felt was a vast, empty confusion. I don't understand, he said quietly. Help me understand, please. But Raymond just kept crying, unable or unwilling to explain. A nurse came in to check the monitors, and Daniel took the opportunity to leave. He walked down the hospital corridor, past the waiting rooms and the information desk, out into the parking lot where the August heat hit him like a wall. He sat in his truck for a long time, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed with messages from his boss, from his daughters asking about dinner, from the normal world that kept moving while his own world fell apart. 7 years. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. How many hours had he spent climbing those stairs? How many times had he rearranged his work schedule, canceled plans, pushed through exhaustion because Raymond needed him? And it was all based on a lie. Daniel started the truck and drove home on autopilot. When he got there, his daughters could tell something was wrong. Melissa, who was 15 and noticed everything, asked him directly, Dad, what's wrong? You look terrible. He couldn't tell them. Not yet. He didn't even know what to tell them. Instead, he ordered pizza for dinner, something he could barely afford but didn't have the energy to cook. He went through the motions of normal evening life, helping Katie with her homework, listening to Melissa talk about her day, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, lying in bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of it all. Who was Raymond Miller, really? If he could walk, why did he pretend he couldn't? What else had he lied about? And most troubling of all, what was Daniel supposed to do now? He thought about calling the police, but what crime had been committed? Lying to your neighbor wasn't illegal. He thought about confronting Raymond again, demanding answers, but the memory of that old man crying in the hospital bed made him hesitate. By morning, Daniel still had no answers. He called the hospital to check on Raymond's condition. Stable, they told him. Recovering well. Expected to be discharged in a few days. Daniel went to work, but his mind wasn't on the job. His coworkers noticed, asked if he was feeling okay. He brushed them off. During lunch break, he sat alone in his truck and stared at his phone. He should walk away. He should forget about Raymond Miller and never climb those stairs again. The man was a liar who had used him for years. Daniel owed him nothing, but even as he thought this, another part of him remembered 7 years of quiet mornings, of Raymond helping his daughters with homework, of small kindnesses that had seemed genuine at the time. Had all of that been fake too? And underneath all the anger and betrayal, one question kept circling back, refusing to be ignored. Why? Why would someone pretend to be paralyzed for years? What could possibly make a person live that kind of lie? Daniel needed to know. He needed to understand. And whether Raymond wanted to explain or not, Daniel was going to get his answers. 3 days passed before Daniel returned to the hospital. 3 days of anger and confusion, of barely sleeping, of going through the motions at work while his mind churned with questions. His daughters knew something was wrong, but he still couldn't bring himself to explain it. How do you tell your kids that someone you trusted, someone who'd been part of their lives for years, had been living a lie? On Sunday morning, Daniel finally got in his truck and drove to Valley Medical Center. He didn't know what he was going to say. He just knew he couldn't move forward without answers. Raymond was sitting up in bed when Daniel walked in. He looked better, had some color back in his face, but his eyes were red and exhausted. He didn't seem surprised to see Daniel. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," Raymond said quietly. Daniel pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. "I almost didn't. I've spent the last 3 days trying to decide if I even wanted to hear your explanation. And I'm here, so talk. Tell me the truth, all of it." Raymond nodded slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he folded them in his lap. For a long moment, he just stared at them, gathering courage or maybe just deciding where to begin. "My name isn't Raymond Miller," he finally said. "It's Raymond Brennan. 15 years ago, I was an investment banker in Boston. I had a corner office, a 6-figure salary, a house in the suburbs. I had a daughter named Claire." Daniel listened without interrupting, watching the old man's face carefully. "I made a terrible mistake," Raymond continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I got involved in gambling. Sports betting, poker games, casinos. It started small, just something to do with clients, but it got out of control. Before I knew it, I was in debt. Serious debt, the kind that gets you hurt or worse." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I panicked. I had access to client accounts at the firm. I thought I could borrow some money, use it to pay off my debts, and then pay it back before anyone noticed. But it doesn't work that way. I took $2.3 million. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd fix everything. But you can't fix something like that." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "You stole money." "Yes, I stole money from people who trusted me. And when the firm started asking questions, when they began investigating, I ran. I emptied what was left of my personal accounts, changed my identity, and disappeared. That was almost 15 years ago. What about your daughter?" Raymond's face crumpled at the question. "Claire, she was 26 when I ran. She worked at a financial services company, had her whole life ahead of her. But this was 2008, right when the economy collapsed. Her company went under. She lost her job, her savings, her apartment. She'd invested everything she had based on advice from people at firms like mine, firms that were lying about how safe those investments were." He had to stop, overcome by emotion. Daniel waited, his own anger temporarily set aside in the face of such obvious pain. "She fell into depression," Raymond whispered. "Lost everything. And I wasn't there. I was hiding, protecting myself. She tried to call me before she died. Left messages I didn't answer because I was too scared of being traced. 3 weeks after I ran, Claire took her own life. By the time I found out, it was too late. I'd missed her funeral, missed my chance to say goodbye, missed everything that mattered." The hospital room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Daniel sat back in his chair, trying to process what he was hearing. "I'm not telling you this to make excuses," Raymond said. "I'm just explaining how I ended up here. After Claire died, I didn't want to exist anymore. I moved from city to city, living under different names, doing odd jobs for cash. I was running from the FBI and from myself. Eventually, I ended up in Portland, became Raymond Miller, found that apartment. And the wheelchair? Daniel asked. The wheelchair was supposed to be a disguise. I bought it at a thrift store when I first moved into the building. I thought if people saw me as disabled, they'd remember the wheelchair, not my face. It was about staying invisible, staying hidden. I never planned to keep up the act for long. Raymond looked at Daniel directly for the first time. But then you moved in, and you offered to help me that first day. You were so kind, so genuine, and I told myself I'd only accept your help once or twice, just until I figured something else out. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and the lie became my life. The wheelchair stopped being a disguise and became a prison I'd built for myself. You could have told me the truth, Daniel said, his voice harder now. At any point in 7 years you could have told me. I know. And I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. Do you know what it's like watching someone sacrifice for you when you don't deserve it? Watching you struggle to raise your daughters alone. Working yourself to exhaustion and still showing up 3 times a week to carry me down those stairs? It ate me alive, Daniel. Not enough to make you tell the truth, no, Raymond admitted. Because I'm a coward. I was too scared. Scared you'd call the police. Scared I'd go to prison. Scared of losing the one genuine connection I'd had with another human being in 15 years. You and your girls, you became my whole world. The only good thing in my miserable existence. So I kept lying. I kept letting you carry me. And I hated myself more every single day. Daniel stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. A family was loading into their car. Kids laughing, parents smiling. Normal life. Simple life. Everything felt so complicated now. The money you stole, Daniel said without turning around. What happened to it? Most of it went to the people I owed. Some I used to disappear to create my new identity. The rest I've been living on very carefully, very slowly. I've been trying to make it last, stretching every dollar. That's why I could give your daughters money for school supplies sometimes. Why I could afford that turkey at Thanksgiving. I was trying to give back in the only small ways I could. Daniel turned around. You were giving my daughter stolen money. I know how that sounds. I know it was wrong. Everything I've done has been wrong. But I swear to you, Daniel, my care for you and Melissa and Katie was never fake. That was real. That was the only real thing in my entire fake life. Something in Raymond's voice made Daniel believe him, which somehow made everything worse. It would be easier if Raymond was just a con artist, a cruel person who used others without feeling. But this was messier. This was a broken man who'd made terrible choices and then kept making them, building a house of cards that was always going to collapse eventually. There's more you need to know, Raymond said. The hospital has already contacted the authorities. A social worker noticed discrepancies in my medical records and started asking questions. The FBI will probably be here soon. My time is up. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions at this news. Relief that the decision was being taken out of his hands. Dread at what would happen next. And surprisingly, a small flicker of sadness. What will happen to you? He asked. Prison, most likely. I'm an old man who's already sick. I probably won't last long. But that's what I deserve. I stole from people. I abandoned my daughter when she needed me most. I lied to you for 7 years. I deserve whatever punishment comes. Daniel moved back to the chair and sat down heavily. His mind was racing, trying to sort through everything. Part of him wanted to stand up, walk out, and never look back. Let Raymond face the consequences of his choices alone. But another part of him, the part that had carried this man up and down stairs for 7 years, the part that had been raised to help neighbors and show kindness, couldn't quite let go. When Claire died, Daniel heard himself ask, did you ever try to make things right? To fix what you'd broken? Raymond nodded slowly. I tried. I sent money anonymously to some of the people who'd been affected by the firm's actions. Not much, not nearly enough, but what I could spare. I volunteered at a homeless shelter for a while, until I got too paranoid about someone recognizing me. I've spent 15 years trying to do small good things to balance out the enormous bad things I did. But you can't really balance that scale, can you? No, Daniel agreed. You can't. They sat in silence for a while. Daniel thought about his own life, his own struggles. He thought about the times he'd been tempted to take shortcuts, to do something wrong to make things easier. He'd never crossed that line, but he understood the temptation. He understood how one bad choice could spiral into a lifetime of consequences. I'm not going to forgive you, Daniel said finally. Not today. Maybe not ever. What you did to me, to my family, that wasn't okay. You stole time and effort I could barely afford to give. I know. But, Daniel continued, surprising himself, I'm not going to hate you either. I'm too tired to hate anyone, and maybe that makes me weak or stupid, but I can't help thinking about all the mornings we spent together. All the times you helped Katie with her math homework. All the conversations we had. Maybe those were built on lies, but they still happened. They still meant something, at least to me. Raymond was crying again, quietly this time. The FBI will have questions for me, Daniel said, standing up. I'll tell them the truth about what I know. After that, I don't know what happens. To you or to us or to any of this. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. For what it's worth, Raymond, or whoever you really are, I hope you find some peace. Even if it's in a prison cell, everyone deserves that much. Daniel left the hospital room and didn't look back. The FBI agents showed up at Daniel's apartment 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning. Daniel had been expecting them, but seeing the badges still sent a jolt of anxiety through his system. He invited them in, offered coffee they politely declined, and answered their questions as honestly as he could. Agent Harrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind demeanor, did most of the talking. Her partner, Agent Lopez, took notes and occasionally asked follow-up questions. They wanted to know everything about Raymond Brennan, though Daniel knew him only as Raymond Miller. How they met, how often they interacted, whether Daniel had ever suspected anything unusual. Never, Daniel told them honestly. He was just my neighbor. A disabled old man who needed help with stairs. That's all I thought he was. And he never mentioned his past? Never talked about his life before moving to Portland? He said he'd been in a car accident. That was it. He didn't talk much about anything personal. I figured he was just a private person. Agent Harrison showed him photos, old news clippings from 2010. There was Raymond, 15 years younger in an expensive suit, being led out of a building in handcuffs. The headline read, "Investment banker vanishes after $2.3 million embezzlement." Looking at those photos, Daniel felt the strangeness of it all over again. That well-dressed man in the pictures seemed like a completely different person from the quiet, humble neighbor he'd known. "We'll need you to provide a formal statement," Agent Harrison said, "and you may be called to testify if this goes to trial. Mr. Brennan's cooperation will likely lead to a plea deal, but prosecutors will want to verify his story." After the agents left, Daniel sat on his couch staring at the copy of the case file they'd left him. He was supposed to be at work, but he'd called in sick. For the first time in years, he just couldn't face the job site. His phone buzzed. It was Melissa. "Dad, I heard from Katie that some FBI people came to the apartment. What's going on?" Word traveled fast in their building. Daniel sighed. He couldn't keep putting this off. His daughters deserved to know the truth. That evening, after a mostly silent dinner, Daniel sat both girls down and explained everything. About Raymond's real identity. The embezzlement, the fake paralysis, the 7 years of lies. He watched their faces go through the same journey his had. Shock, confusion, disbelief, anger. "But Mr. Miller helped me with my homework all the time," Katie said. Her 15-year-old face scrunched up in confusion. "He was always so nice. How could he do something like that?" "People are complicated," Daniel said, though it felt like an inadequate answer. "Sometimes good people do bad things. Sometimes bad people do good things. Most of us are somewhere in between." "Are you going to testify against him?" Melissa asked. At 17, she had a sharper edge, a more black and white view of right and wrong. "I don't know yet. Probably, if they need me to." "Good," Melissa said firmly. "He used you, Dad. He lied to us for years. He deserves whatever happens to him." Daniel couldn't argue with that, even though something in his gut resisted the finality of it. That night, after his daughters had gone to bed, Daniel found himself unable to sleep. He pulled out his laptop and started searching for information about the original case. The news articles from 2010 painted Raymond Brennan as a villain, and rightfully so. But as Daniel dug deeper, he found other stories. Articles about the 2008 financial crisis, about investment firms that had destroyed people's lives with risky practices and outright fraud. He found a brief mention of Claire Brennan, Raymond's daughter, in an article about rising depression rates among young professionals who'd lost everything in the crash. Daniel wasn't trying to excuse what Raymond had done. Stealing was stealing, lying was lying, but he was trying to understand the full picture, to see the context that had led to such terrible choices. On impulse, he searched for information about the people Raymond had stolen from. Most were wealthy clients of the investment firm, people who'd eventually been reimbursed through insurance and legal settlements. The firm itself had gone bankrupt a year after Raymond fled, caught up in their own web of questionable practices. Raymond's crime had been one small domino in a much larger collapse. None of this changed what Raymond had done to him personally. The 7 years of deception, the time and energy Daniel had given based on a lie. That betrayal was still real, still painful. But Daniel was starting to see it in a broader context, and he didn't know how to feel about that. The next week passed in a blur. Daniel went to work, came home, took care of his daughters. The routine helped. But everywhere he went in the building, he thought about Raymond. Walking past apartment 4B, climbing the stairs they'd navigated together so many times. The absence was strange, heavy. Other neighbors had heard the news by now. Mrs. Patterson from 3A stopped Daniel in the hallway one afternoon. "Can you believe it?" she said, eyes wide with gossip hunger. "All this time, right under our noses. And you were helping him. You must feel so used." Daniel just nodded and excused himself. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to process his feelings for the entertainment of nosy neighbors. On Thursday morning, exactly a week after Raymond's stroke, Daniel received an unexpected call from a lawyer named Ms. Chen. No relation to the doctor, she clarified. She represented Raymond Brennan and needed to speak with Daniel about a matter of urgency. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Ms. Chen was younger than Daniel expected, maybe in her early 30s, with a professional but warm demeanor. She ordered them both coffee and got straight to business. "My client wanted me to give you this," she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Daniel stared at it but didn't touch it. "What is it?" "A letter, and information about a bank account. Mr. Brennan has been setting aside money for several years. It's in a trust fund designated for your daughter's education." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I don't want his money." "I understand your feelings," Ms. Chen said gently, "but this isn't charity or an attempt to buy forgiveness. My client has been planning this for a long time. The account currently holds approximately $180,000. It's been carefully invested and will continue to grow. Your daughters can access it for educational expenses when they turn 18. $180,000. Daniel's mind reeled. That was more money than he'd earn in 3 years, maybe 4 given his salary. That was Melissa's college tuition. That was Katie's future. "It's stolen money," Daniel said, pushing the envelope back. "I can't take stolen money." Ms. Chen shook her head. "Actually, the FBI has already reviewed the account. These funds came from legitimate sources over the past 10 years. Mr. Brennan has been working odd jobs, investing carefully, living extremely frugally. He's been building this fund specifically for this purpose. The money is clean, Mr. Brooks, legal. It's yours if you want it." Daniel picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long, and a document with bank account information. "He wanted you to read the letter," Ms. Chen said, "but only if you're ready. There's no pressure, no expectation. He knows he has no right to ask anything of you." Daniel folded the envelope and put it in his jacket pocket. "Is he still in the hospital?" "He's being transferred to a federal facility tomorrow. He's accepted a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison, with the possibility of early release due to his age and health condition. It's a lenient sentence, all things considered. The prosecutors agreed to it because of his cooperation and the fact that most of the original victims have already been compensated through other means." 5 years, Daniel repeated. Raymond would be 75 when he got out, maybe older if he didn't get early release. If he survived prison at all. Ms. Chen stood up. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Brooks. Whatever you decide to do with the account, know that my client's intention was purely to try to give back what he took from you. Not the money he stole, but the time, the energy, the kindness. He knows it's not equal. He knows it doesn't fix anything, but it's what he has to offer." After she left, Daniel sat in the coffee shop for a long time, the envelope burning a hole in his pocket. He thought about Melissa, who'd been talking about college scholarships, worried about how much debt she'd take on. He thought about Katie, who was just starting to think about her future. He thought about the weight that had been pressing on his shoulders for years, the constant stress of never having enough money. That evening, he sat his daughters down again. "Mr. Miller, Raymond, whatever we're calling him now. He set up an education fund for you two. It's a lot of money. Enough for college." Their reactions were immediate and split. Melissa's face hardened. "I don't want his money, Dad. I'll get scholarships. I'll take out loans. I don't want anything from him." But Katie looked different, torn. "Is it really enough for college? Both of us?" "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "It's enough." "Then maybe we should think about it," Katie said carefully. "I mean, I'm mad at him too. I'm so mad. But if he really saved this money for us legally and we need it, isn't it stupid to refuse it just because we're angry?" Melissa turned on her sister. "He lied to us for 7 years, Katie. He used Dad." "I know that," Katie shot back. "But Dad's been killing himself trying to give us a future. Working double shifts, never buying anything for himself. If this money is real and it's legal, maybe it's okay to accept it. Maybe that's the one good thing that comes out of all this mess." Daniel listened to his daughters argue, seeing both sides clearly. Pride versus practicality, principle versus need. There was no easy answer. That night, alone in his room, Daniel finally opened Raymond's letter. The handwriting was shaky but careful, each word chosen with obvious thought. The letter was long, apologetic, full of regrets. But one paragraph stood out to Daniel, made him pause and read it several times. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness and I'm not asking for it, but I want you to know that watching you be a father, seeing how you sacrificed for your daughters, how you showed up every single day despite your own struggles, taught me something I'd forgotten. It reminded me of who I used to be before I made all my terrible choices, and it showed me who I should have been for Claire. You were the person I should have been, and I hope that by helping your daughters I can honor the memory of my own daughter in some small way." Daniel folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. He still didn't know what to do. He still felt betrayed and used and angry, but he also felt something else, something harder to name, understanding maybe, or at least the beginning of it. The question wasn't whether Raymond deserved forgiveness. The question was whether Daniel could accept help from someone who'd wronged him, whether he could separate the gift from the giver, whether he could let his daughters benefit from one good thing in a situation full of bad things. He didn't have an answer yet. But for the first time since this all began, Daniel felt like maybe eventually he would. Daniel made his decision on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after Raymond's stroke had turned everything upside down. He was sitting at his kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to figure out how he was going to pay for Melissa's college application fees. The calculator kept showing him the same unforgiving numbers no matter how many times he entered them. Katie walked in, poured herself a glass of orange juice, and sat down across from him. "You're thinking about the money," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I'm always thinking about money," Daniel replied with a tired smile. "Just different money this time." "I think we should take it," Katie said simply. "And before you say anything, let me explain." Daniel set down his calculator and gave her his full attention. "I've been thinking a lot about what Mr. Miller did," Katie continued. "And yeah, it was awful. He lied to us. He took advantage of your kindness. That's not okay, and I'm not saying it is. But he also helped me pass algebra. He talked to me when you were working late and I was scared to be alone. He remembered my birthday every year. Those things happened. They were real, even if other things were fake." She took a breath, organizing her thoughts like she did when she was working through a difficult homework problem. "And I keep thinking about Mom," she said quietly. "About how she left us and never sent the money she was supposed to. About how that's hurt us for years. We've struggled because someone didn't help when they should have. Now here's someone offering to help and we're going to say no because we're mad at them. What's the difference between us refusing this and Mom refusing to pay what she owes? Either way, we suffer for someone else's mistakes." Daniel felt something crack in his chest. His 15-year-old daughter had just made the argument he'd been wrestling with for weeks, clearer than he'd been able to see it himself. "Your sister doesn't feel the same way," he said. "I know. Melissa's angrier than I am, but Dad, Melissa's also terrified about college costs. She lies awake at night worrying about it. I hear her crying sometimes. If we take this money, we both get to go to college without drowning in debt. Isn't that worth more than our pride? That afternoon, Daniel called a family meeting. All three of them sat in the living room and Daniel explained his decision. "We're going to accept the education fund," he said. "Not because what Raymond did was okay. Not because we forgive him. But because you two deserve a future that isn't crushed under financial stress. This money was set aside for you legally, and we're going to use it the way it was intended." Melissa started to protest, but Daniel held up his hand. "I know you're angry, Mel. I'm angry too. But Katie's right. We don't have to like where the money came from to accept that it can help us. And maybe that's the only good thing that comes out of all this. Maybe that's how we take something broken and use it to build something better." Melissa was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm never forgiving him, Dad." "You don't have to," Daniel assured her. "None of us has to." The next day, Daniel signed the paperwork to accept the trust fund. He also made one other decision. He asked Ms. Chen to arrange a visit to see Raymond before he was transferred to the federal prison. The federal holding facility was nothing like the hospital. It was cold, institutional, all concrete and metal. Daniel had to go through security, empty his pockets, be scanned and searched. When they finally brought Raymond out to the visiting area, Daniel almost didn't recognize him. The old man looked smaller somehow, diminished. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his thin frame. His hands were cuffed in front of him. When he saw Daniel, his eyes widened with surprise. "Daniel," he said, his voice hoarse, "I didn't think I'd see you again." They sat down at opposite sides of a table, a guard standing nearby. For a moment, neither spoke. "I accepted the money," Daniel said finally. "For my daughters." Raymond's face flooded with relief and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you for letting me do that one thing, right?" "I'm not here to thank you," Daniel said, keeping his voice even. "And I'm not here to forgive you. I'm here because I needed to tell you something, and I needed to do it face to face." Raymond nodded, waiting. "What you did to me was wrong," Daniel said. "The lying, the using, the taking advantage of my kindness. That hurt me in ways I'm still trying to process. You made me doubt my own judgment, made me feel like a fool. That's going to take a long time to get over." "I know. I'm so sorry. But," Daniel continued, "I also spent 7 years getting to know you. The you that existed in that apartment. Helping my daughters, talking about the weather, being part of our lives. And I don't think all of that was fake. I think some of it was real. I think the person you became while you were hiding was maybe closer to who you were supposed to be all along." Raymond's eyes were wet. "I tried to be. God, I tried. Every day with you and your girls, I tried to be the man I should have been for Claire." "I read your letter," Daniel said. "About Claire, about everything. And I'm not going to pretend I understand what you went through, but I'm trying to understand why you made the choices you did. Not to excuse them, but to make sense of them." "There's no sense to make," Raymond said bitterly. "I was a coward. I am a coward. When things got hard, I ran. When I should have faced my mistakes, I hid. When my daughter needed me, I chose my own safety over her life." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "You did all those things. But you also spent the last 7 years trying to be someone different. And you put aside money for my daughters instead of using it to make your own life easier. That has to count for something." Raymond shook his head. "It doesn't balance. Nothing I do will ever balance what I took from Claire. From you. From everyone I hurt." "No," Daniel said. "It doesn't balance. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that people can change even if they can never completely fix what they broke." They sat in silence for a while. The guard shifted his weight, bored. "I'll be in here for a while," Raymond said finally. "Maybe a long while. I don't know if I'll survive it. I'm old, I'm sick. I know. Will you tell the girls I'm sorry? That I never meant to hurt them?" Daniel considered this. "I'll tell them you said so. But they're going to process this in their own way, in their own time. Melissa might never forgive you. Katie's more open to it, but even she's hurt. You need to be okay with that. I am. Or I will be. As okay as I can be with any of this." Daniel stood up. "The visit had a time limit and it was almost up. I'm not going to visit you again," he said. "I need to move forward and I can't do that if I'm tied to your past. But I wanted to come this once. I wanted you to know that we're going to be okay. My girls are going to go to college. They're going to have opportunities. And yeah, you helped make that possible. So thank you for that, even if I hate how we got here." Raymond stood too, his cuffed hands hanging uselessly. "Take care of them, Daniel. Be the father I wasn't. You already are, but keep being that man." "I will." Daniel turned to leave, then paused. "And Raymond? I hope you find some peace in there." Real peace, not the fake kind you've been living with. Everyone deserves a chance at that, even people who've made terrible mistakes. He walked out without looking back. The guard led Raymond away in the opposite direction. That was the last time they would see each other. Over the next few months, life slowly returned to a new kind of normal. Melissa applied to colleges, her application fees paid without stress for the first time. Katie brought her grades up, knowing college was actually possible now. Daniel kept working his construction job, but the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. The apartment building found a new tenant for 4B, a young couple with a baby. Daniel helped them move in, carried boxes up the stairs, made small talk about the neighborhood. Life went on. Sometimes Daniel thought about Raymond, wondered how he was doing in federal prison. He'd heard through Ms. Chen that Raymond was teaching other inmates to read, helping them prepare for their GED exams, trying to do some good, even in that place. One evening, about 6 months after everything had happened, Katie came home from school excited. She'd been accepted to her first-choice college with a partial scholarship. The education fund would cover the rest, with enough left over for her master's degree if she wanted to pursue one. "Dad," she said, her eyes shining, "this is really happening. I'm going to college, me. The girl who almost failed math in 9th grade. Daniel hugged her tight. "I'm so proud of you." That night he pulled out Raymond's letter one more time. He'd read it a dozen times now, but one part still hit him hard every time. "You showed me that it's never too late to try to be better, even when you've already failed in the worst ways possible. Thank you for that gift. It's the only one I've received in 15 years that I didn't feel I had to run from." Daniel folded the letter and put it away. He still didn't know if he'd forgiven Raymond. Forgiveness felt too big, too final. But he'd found something else, something more useful. Understanding, acceptance. A recognition that people were complicated. That good and bad could exist in the same person. That sometimes the best you could do was learn from the mess and try to move forward. A year later, Daniel got a letter from the prison. Raymond had been released early due to declining health. He'd moved to a hospice facility in another state. He wrote to say thank you one final time, to ask about the girls, to say he was proud to have known them even if he didn't deserve to. Daniel wrote back, just once. He told Raymond that the girls were thriving. He told him about Melissa's college acceptance, about Katie's growing confidence. He said he hoped Raymond's final days brought him some measure of peace. He didn't say he forgave him, but he signed the letter with gratitude for the one good thing you managed to do. 3 months later, Raymond died quietly in his sleep. Ms. Chen called to inform Daniel. There was no funeral, no memorial. Raymond had requested his body be donated to science, his final act of trying to give something back, Daniel told his daughters. They cried, which surprised all of them. Not for what Raymond had been, but for what he could have been, for the wasted potential, the lost years, the relationship that might have existed if everything had been different. "Is it weird that I'm sad?" Katie asked. "Even after everything?" "No," Daniel said. "It's not weird. It's human. People are complicated. Our feelings about them get to be complicated too.